Hi, everybody, and welcome to Going for Gold, brought to you by the Women's Game. This is our preview podcast ahead of the U.S. Women's National Team's quarterfinal game at the Olympics, in which we'll be playing Japan. After 3 wins, 9 points, 9 goals in the group stage for our U.S. Women's National Team, it's time to get down to business in the knockout rounds, and I could not be more excited to be experiencing this tournament alongside you all, our listeners. I'm joined today by my co-host, one of my favorite people in the whole world, defender for the Portland Thorns, Cat Mommy. It's Becky Sauerbrunn.
Sammy, always a pleasure and a highlight of my day to be joining you. I also just have to tell you that I had a game last night, and as I was like gathering our wild wings that we have post game, one of my teammates was just like, "Hey, I just wanted to compliment you and Sammy. Sammy is so amazing on the women's game." So I thought I would start this podcast with just a great vibe.
Oh my gosh, great vibes again. Wait, I have to ask, who said that?
Marisa Shiva.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
I feel so
I was
loud.
like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I didn't know that players actually listened. And she's like, oh yeah, I could listen to you guys talk for days.
Oh my God, I freaking love that so much. This is a podcast for the players, by the players.
Excellent.
You know what it is. Okay, great vibes, Becky. I love that start. Before we get into it, I just want to remind everybody, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the Women's Game on YouTube right now, especially before these knockout games start, because you don't want to miss any of the discussions that we're bringing to you around the game. So, Becky, a lot of Olympics have happened so far. We had Dronegate with the Canadian Federation. USA Women's Rugby Sevens won bronze. USA Gymnastics won gold. Snoop Dogg has been out and about, gracing us all with his presence at all the sports. Katie Ledecky won her race by basically an entire pool length. The women's game has been joined by Georgia Stanway, Midge Purce, and Christy Mewis. So I need to ask you, what has been your favorite Olympic moment so far?
Okay, well, there's been a few. First, I was listening to the Australia Do It Live. Zola and I were driving to the game yesterday together and listening to it. And there was a part where you were kind of just like reading out some stuff.
Yeah.
And then you asked Christy a question. And she was like, I really wasn't paying attention. And the way that next time you spoke, you sounded like a little annoyed. And Zola and I were just like cackling. It was like really funny.
I mean, I like was a little annoyed because I was like, Christy, I'm at work and like you can't just not listen to me. But it was also like so silly and funny that I think she just thought I was like reading a instruction to the guest, and she just kind of zoned out and was like, what am I going to do? Like pretend answer? I can't do that. It was very core sibling moment.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. I would have to say the next thing that I've just loved is watching the Canadian women's team advance, even with the 6-point deduction from Dronegate. And I think we've talked about it before, but the way that something can galvanize a team and really bring them together, and they really seem to have come together and have just been like, all right, you're going to put us at this much of a deduction, like hold my beer. I'm going to win out the entire group, get second out of their group. Like that's amazing. And so Janine, Becky, Jessie Fleming are also Portland Thorns. And so I'm just really proud of them because that is just outrageous. It's like, so, it's really cool.
It is outrageous that they were able to pull that off. It's crazy. And I am happy for the players as well. I'm sure we're going to talk more about this later in the podcast, but I think that's really big of us to be so happy for them, Becky.
It is. I can appreciate when monumental, very cool things happen, even if it's from the Canadian team.
I hear that. It's been very impressive to watch.
Yeah. And then I would just say lastly, watching men's gymnastics, I just have to shout out Steven Nedorosik, the pommel horse specialist.
Oh yeah. I've seen so many things about this.
Unbelievable. So I was watching it pretty closely and I'm just like, who is this dude who just has his glasses on? He's just kind of like laying back, eyes closed in the zone. And it was almost like he was being treated by the other American gymnasts like he was a pitcher on a no-no. So he was just like, so chill. And you just kind of like learn more and more about him and what he does and how he's a pommel horse specialist. And he just nailed it. I mean, he closed out the entire night, ensured that the men's team got a bronze medal, the first medal that they've gotten in 16 years. And I think I have an affinity for athletes that wear glasses or have contacts, because in 2011, Dawn Scott, who was our sport performance specialist at the time, she kind of put us through these eye exams and eye tests. And afterwards, when we're getting our results, the doctor was like, Becky, how have you been playing soccer without correctional lenses? And I was like, oh, I didn't really know it made that much a difference. Like I could tell a person who they were by their running gait. I just couldn't like recognize their facial expressions or what they looked like.
Are you joking?
No,
So
I'm
you
not.
were like out there watching blurry players run around and then you got contacts and now you can see.
Exactly. And to this day, it makes so much sense why I didn't really play a lot of long balls, because it's like I wasn't quite sure who I was playing it to. And now that I have correctional lenses, like this whole new world of soccer opened up to me.
Oh my gosh. Well, get your eyes checked, folks. You heard it from Becky Sauerbrunn first. It can really help.
It really can. It really can. But Sammy, I'm also interested about your favorite Olympic moments thus far.
I know. My gosh. I feel like I already rattled some of them off, but I've been into swimming lately. Katie Ledecky finishing her race, the 1,500 meter freestyle, with nobody else even in sight as they took the picture of her finishing. So she won by 10 seconds at the Olympics, which is like, how are you that much better than everybody else? I don't know. So I have so much respect for Katie Ledecky. I love seeing that. She holds literally all the records. She has 8 gold medals. Then I love seeing Simone Biles calling out the haters with Team USA Gymnastics, winning gold again today in the all-around. She had faced so much adversity in the last Olympics, so I've loved watching gymnastics. Obviously, it's also just like so fun to watch. I again have to mention Ilona Maher in the Rugby Sevens winning bronze. We are going to talk a little bit more on that later, and Michele Kang's donation to USA Rugby. Last question on broad Olympics, though, Becky. If you were not a footballer, what other sport do you think you'd be competing in the Olympics? Like, what would you want to do? And then, like, what would you be best at?
Well, what would you think that I could do?
Well, we had some ideas at the women's game internally flying around, and we got a couple guesses that it would be archery, because you're just like so poised and like collected and calm and like focused.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would say that I think being good at archery would be perfect for like the zombie apocalypse. Like if I wanted to survive,
Yeah.
I feel like archery or fencing would be like the way to go.
Wow. I can see you being pretty good at that. I would definitely do swimming because I just love swimming. I went swimming today.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, I would have definitely thought swimming for you. I just didn't know if you would have done like sprint or more distance.
I don't really know. I feel like when I was younger, if I was focused on swimming, I would have established what I was best at. I feel like I could have been good at swimming. I got that long body.
I feel like, yeah, you do. You really, maybe you like missed a calling.
It's not too late. It literally is not too late, but we need to get into the soccer now. We could just talk Olympics all day long. This podcast is brought to you by our very good friends at Allstate. So Reba, you're back. We haven't heard from you since our very first pregame podcast in which we spoke about the U.S. and Zambia. Looking back over the last 3 games, what have you made of the U.S.'s performances in this group stage? 3 wins.
Yeah, I've been very impressed by the performances. And I heard someone somewhere say that this team has a real sense of inevitability. And I think that's the perfect way of putting how I feel about this team. It's like they are going to get the job done. There is a sense of belief that this crew can do whatever they need to do.
I totally agree. I like feel the magic. I feel like one of my main takeaways from the group stage is that we beat like different kinds of teams. Zambia was a huge threat in transition. Germany was physical, really good in the wide areas. And then Australia played this really disciplined low block for much of the game. And Japan, the team that we're playing next in the quarterfinal, present another new challenge, but I have so much faith in us.
Yeah, agreed. I think Japan is a different style while still taking elements of the teams that we played in the group stage. So I think they're going to be organized like Australia. I think they'll have good transition, maybe not as great as Zambia, but I think they're pretty good at it. And they do have special players like Germany. I think Japan, to their style, just brings this fluidity and intelligence in their movements. And they're so technically secure on the ball. So I think defensively, this is going to be a real test for the U.S.
Yeah, that's a good point. How are you planning on watching the game? It's on at 6 a.m. Pacific time,
Yep.
9 a.m. Eastern time. We're playing Japan on Saturday in the quarterfinal. What are you going to do? You're going to get up?
Well, of course. I have training that day, but it is so early that I think I'll be able to watch
The whole game
if it stays in regulation. So let's go US, stay in regulation.
But
But I'll for sure be probably crushing some coffee the entire day.
Yeah, crushing iced maple lattes. I actually think, Becky, I know your go-to is an iced latte, and like you need to shake up some maple syrup in there. I'm telling you.
I just don't like adding things. I just want the pure coffee bean. I'm a real purist.
You're just wrong. You're just wrong.
Yeah.
Did everybody just hear me tell Becky Sauerbrunn that she was wrong? I can't believe I just did that. Okay, back to this U.S. Women's National Team. I want to start out by talking about and really praising the front three. This U.S. Women's National Team scored 9 goals in the group stage. 7 of them came from a combination of Mallory Swanson, Sophia Smith, and Trinity Rodman. As we came into the tournament, though, Becky, there was some doubt cast on our attack about our ability to finish chances in the final third. Do you think that anybody out there is still questioning this? Like still questioning if we are in good form on finishing chances? Or do you think those doubts have been like totally washed away?
I think 9 goals in 3 games says a lot. I think there were some doubters during the Zambia game, especially when they went a person down, that we only stayed at 3. But I think you have to have a bigger picture of the tournament setting in that case. And so you're 3 up. That's great. Goal differential. Don't let a goal in. So I think defensively we were really clean that game. And then you just kind of think of like, let's save legs. Let's play smart. Yeah. And Emma was, now looking back, clearly going for 3 wins in the group stage because I think she played her strongest squad each game. And so, I mean, it paid off if you look back at it now.
I know. I completely agree. And the number of goals we were able to score, I think, is just – I'm not doubting them at all. I maybe had some questions at that Costa Rica game. I was like, is this going to be our Achilles heel? Not anymore. I think we're in great form. I think we have so much confidence. We've scored 17 goals under Emma Hayes so far, and 11 of them have been scored by that front three, our starters, the Holy Trinity.
No. I'm refusing to call them the Holy Trinity. They're Triforce or nothing at all.
The Holy Trinity is too Trinity focused. I agree. But the nicknames have been very fun.
Oh, that has been really fun.
It's been really, really fun. So we have been a little bit unlucky, a few critical injuries in the group stage. So Jaden Shaw has been unavailable throughout. We saw Tierna Davidson get injured in the second game and then miss the third game due to that injury. So let's talk a little bit about Emily Sonnet slotting into that center back spot for Tierna Davidson. What have you noticed has changed in the back line? I have this one example, not against Sonnet, not against Naomi, but Alana Kennedy's goal for Australia, and then she had another near miss goal just moments later, maybe had a little bit to do with we lost a lot of height when we lost Tierna. So I want to know what you think when you see our back line with the changes that have been made.
I don't necessarily think it was a lack of height that was our problem in the latter stages of that Australia game. I think when a team just kind of is rushing for a goal, throwing numbers into the box, bombing in crosses, it's more about reading the flight of the ball, positioning yourself for knockdowns, making sure you're tracking players and getting into good positions. So I think watching Australia's goal back, it was a knockdown where we just kind of lost track of Alana Kennedy. And the near miss to me was that there was just a little bit of a lack of positioning on her initial run. So not necessarily a height thing. I think that always is helpful.
Yeah.
But a lot of other things go into that.
That makes sense. If it was a height thing, like give us the inside scoop a little bit. If you're a defender and you're playing against players who are taller than you, how do you like set up your body to make sure that you're making it as difficult as possible for them? Like what's the main thing you'd think about or focus on in that moment?
The first thing that I would focus on is impeding their run to the ball. And so before it even becomes a problem, you can squash it by just bumping them or getting into the way of where they want to go. So that's why you can stop a threat before it even becomes one. And if that doesn't happen, it's getting a body on the player as they're jumping up. And so if you can knock them off course in the air, or actually if you jump early, which is something that a lot of defensive coaches have spoken to me about, if you jump early and then the player you're going against jumps, it actually lifts you higher. So it doesn't matter how tall you are. All of a sudden the momentum is taking you even higher.
They like slingshot you up more.
Yeah, exactly. So you're using the momentum against them. So a lot of the time, if you're going against someone that's taller than you or just better in the air than you, it's just making sure that if they're going to win the ball, it's not cleanly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess the onus is really on the attacker to get the ball on frame. And if you're the defender, you could hit it literally anywhere else in the world except on frame.
Exactly. I mean, you're the tower of power, so I'm sure you've gone against a lot of defenders that have been smaller than you. Has anything,
Yeah.
do you feel like, really worked against you?
Yeah, I mean, I basically think if I would get going and run freely, like there was just too much like velocity. Like there's no stopping like a train when it's going full speed. So I think you do really have to get a touch on them early and like throw them honestly like foul. Like I think of, I know we're talking about in the box, you have to be so careful, but I also think that like it has to be such a clear foul to actually get called. And if you like dig into somebody's waist a little bit on like a corner kick or a cross or something, and you just throw them off by their balance a little, like it's not going to get called as a foul. Because it's such a slight touch, but it changes them by that 1% that now they can't get the ball in frame. So
Yeah.
I'm an advocate for being like really physical in those moments. Kind of exactly what you said, throw them off their run a little bit early. So we talked about the change we saw because of Tierna Davidson's injury, and we've gotten to see 2 of the 4 alternates dressed for games because of these couple injuries that we mentioned. Corey Bethune made her Olympic debut on Wednesday against Australia in place of Jaden Shaw, while Emily Sams remained on the bench but dressed in place of Tierna. And those versatile players that we have been praising coming into the tournament on the U.S. roster, like Emily Sonnet and Crystal Dunn, have proved to be, shocker, versatile. And they've been able to help the team out from various positions on the field, subbing in when there's an injury, playing different positions. Have any of these changes, players playing different positions or alternates coming in or Emily Sonnet slotting into center back, have any of these changes stood out to you? Or any of them potentially an issue, or are you seeing them as positives?
I think what I've noticed the most is that nothing has really changed at all, which is ideal. I think when your versatile players just kind of fit in seamlessly, I think it's a sign that the players are in form and that there's just a really strong game plan that's being executed well. And I think when you look at Crystal at left back, how she was playing like Jenna was earlier before the tournament even started, it's just very similar. And I think when you saw Sonnet slide in next to Naomi, it was without any issue. It was very seamless. And so I think like that's what you want to happen when you have different players having to fill these different roles, is that you don't really notice a change or a drop off in there. I don't think there has been.
Yeah, totally agree. I think there is another big thing we need to be aware of going into this game against Japan, and that's that Sam Coffey picked up her second yellow in the game against Australia, so she's going to be suspended for the quarterfinal. And I think potentially we could see Sonnet slot in there if Tierna's healthy. Like, I think just like what you said, we have players who can slot in and there's not going to be a drop off. But I want to talk to you a little bit more specifically about Sam Coffey. I know she's your teammate at the Portland Thorns. You and I were talking about this a little bit. Can you share with me Sam's tendencies? Like, something I asked you was, does she pick up yellows? Is that something we should have been more concerned about going into this game, or is this out of character for her?
So I would say it's out of character. And Coffey is relatively new to the 6 role. She's been more of an advanced midfielder, like an 8-10, most of her career, especially collegiately. So one of the things I've seen her work a lot on with the Thorns is just her defensive positioning and the timing of when to disrupt a play or to absorb a play, the willingness to get into tackles, because tackling is a technique. Like, you can train. A lot of it's timing. A lot of it is just like the willingness to huck your body into something. So she has grown so much in that defensive side of it. And while doing so, she has not picked up a lot of yellows for us. So I think it was pretty rare to see her pick up 2 yellows in pretty quick succession during this tournament.
I know, it's super unfortunate that we saw that. What do you think we will miss most about her in this upcoming game? Like, why is she so effective on this U.S. women's national team?
On the ball, she has great feet. She's always making herself available. I think as a 6, sometimes you always want to go towards the ball. And I think with her, she has a great field awareness that sometimes you have to work against the grain to open up space, not only for herself, but the people in front of her. So I think she's very good at that. I think she can play on one touch. I think she can turn players. She can drive with the ball if need be. She's got great range with her passing. Her technique is really good. And she covers ground. So I think any team would be lucky to have her as their 6.
Yeah, and it's a big role to fill in. And so I mentioned maybe that Sonnet could play that 6 role as long as Tierna is back and healthy, but there are other options. How do you foresee us adjusting on Saturday?
Yeah, I think you're right that Tierna's availability is like the key to this. If she's good to go, then you can slot Sonnet into the 6, like you said, where she's had a bunch of reps anyway. And if Tierna can't go, like that is where it kind of gets interesting. I do think that you can play Casey Krueger as the center back if you want Sonnet as that 6.
Oh, interesting.
I also think that you could bring Lindsay Horan down and maybe you choose to play more of like a double pivot against Japan and Rose Lavelle as the 10. So I think there are so many different ways, like puzzle pieces you can put together. I am really interested in knowing how Emma would do it if Tierna is not available.
I know. I mean, we're going to find out soon, but it's very exciting to think about. I do want to take a moment to talk about somebody you just mentioned, someone who hasn't been a part of the conversation as much yet this tournament, Casey Krueger. She has subbed into all 3 group stage games, and she's really helped the U.S. close out some big wins. Can you talk to us a little bit about what Casey offers to this team, why you think she's such an important part of the roster? Like, there's so many good outside backs in the NWSL, so what sets Casey apart to have her consistently on rosters like this?
I've known Casey for a really long time, played with her and against her, and she is one of the best, if not the best, 1v1 defender. And her positioning is so great. She uses her body to usher the attacker into the space that she wants. She's strong in the tackle. She's willing to go to the ground if she needs to. She is near impossible to get around, and she's great in the air. She's a wonderful defender, and honestly, like, if you need to kill off a game or there's someone that is just kind of amazingly talented on the other side, like she is a perfect player to have to kind of negate that.
Yeah, I think that's such a great description of her. I feel like we are really lucky to have her on this roster. She's versatile. She has speed. She can make good decisions. She can cross. She can slot an outside back or center back. I love that. Those details really matter here. Taking a step back and kind of zooming out, we're going into the knockout rounds. It's win or go home. When you think about like knockout football as opposed to a friendly or a group stage game, what changes as a player? Like what changes in the atmosphere? And are you aware that this could be your last game? Is that how you're playing? Like, is it a totally different feeling?
I mean, as Megan Rapinoe would say, it's time to unclench those butt cheeks, people. Because yeah, you are aware you're entering into the knockout rounds. And I've been on teams where it's almost like you say the round robin is one tournament and then the knockout stage is the second tournament, because it is completely different and you almost need to have a mindset shift.
Yeah.
And I would say that in the knockout rounds, like the game state becomes so important. And by game state, I mean, if it's later in the match, are you up a goal and you need to protect the lead, or are you down a goal and you need to chase, and all of a sudden you have to change tactics, you change formation, like all these things become vitally important. And yeah, everything's just heightened. Like mistakes become costlier, and I think that can get into players' minds, and you're less willing to like make that pass or shoot that shot. And I think sometimes you hear commentators use the word cagey when they're talking about games. And that's so true in knockout rounds, because I think teams are a bit more careful, and it leads to these kind of like uncomfortable lulls in the game.
Yeah, I think what I remember most about entering the knockout stage at the World Cup when we played Spain in that round of 16 game was like, we could go home after this. Like you plan your life out to be there until the final. So you like don't anticipate that you'll be flying home back to your normal life. And the idea that you like could is like, oh my God, I am not packing my suitcase tonight. Like that would be so horrible. Like the real life implications of like being done and going home from the tournament is so scary. The other thing we need to keep in mind about the knockout stages though, Becky, is that it could go into penalty kicks.
Yeah.
I know, like this is something we have the schedule all laid out. And I'm like, hang on, everybody. Any of these could go way over. But luckily, the U.S. has the best penalty kick saver/taker in the entire world. We have Alyssa Naeher. That's why Alyssa is our Allstate player to watch as we head into these knockout rounds. Becky, talk to us about if we do go into penalty kicks in this quarterfinal. How confident are you in Alyssa to just get us through?
I am so confident. And it's because I just don't see any other goalkeepers doing what Alyssa can do in a shootout. I would say, like, in the past, a goalkeeper does an amazing job in a shootout if they save one. And Alyssa is like saving 2 or 3.
I know.
And it's such an advantage if your goalkeeper can do that. And I think the US, we've just historically been so strong in taking PKs as well that we're going to capitalize on that, including Alyssa. Like, Alyssa is an amazing PK taker.
I
So
know.
it's like madness.
I know. It's crazy how much of an advantage that she is. I actually talked to her a lot about her penalty kick mentality and what goes through her mind when she makes a save and what goes through her mind when she steps up to take a kick on an episode of Friendlies that we had her on earlier this year. So if anybody's interested, you go back and listen to that before we enter into these knockout rounds. But I did want to touch briefly on Alyssa's performance in the tournament so far. She had a huge save early on in the game against Germany. We did have kind of a bad giveaway in the midfield, and Eula Brand dribbled down the field, slotted it over to Leah Schuler, who was wide open in the box. Kind of just had to slot it in, but Alyssa stopped it. And that was a really big moment for us in a really big game. And I think what Alyssa making a save like that does for our team is it gives everybody that permission to try things and play with freedom, because we will make mistakes on the field. Like, it is going to happen. We will give up shots against, but just knowing that it's Alyssa that's in there, I think is so vital for the back line, but for everybody on the field to play freely.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And even if we're not making mistakes and a team just like breaks us down and gets an opportunity, great goalkeepers make those saves and keep you in those matches. And I think what differentiates like great and just good is like good goalkeepers will make the saves that they're expected to make. Great ones like Alyssa will make those saves they have no right to make to keep you in those matches.
I actually love that so much. It's like the saves that the player who shot it is like, what the hell? Like, how?
Like, they're already running away celebrating, and they're like, no.
Where like the shooter becomes like a victim of the situation, because it's just like, you stole that from me.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, so for you, Becky, considering the couple of injuries we don't know about yet, Sam Coffey's yellow card, do you think there's a player on this team poised to be the difference maker against Japan?
I don't think it's going to be a player. I think it's actually going to be a unit, and I think it's the midfield unit. Yeah, I think defensively they're going to be dealing with a lot of numbers, so overloads. I think the Japanese players will be very good combining and just getting into very vulnerable spaces. And so I think defensively we have to be very clean. And then on the attacking side, they're just going to be vital linking up the play. I think Japan is very smart defensively, and I don't think they're just going to allow our Triforce to really get on the ball and run. I'm forcing it. Triforce on the ball to run freely, and so you're going to need the midfielders to link up the play.
Yeah, so something I have been researching a little bit. I had heard this through the grapevine years ago, and then I was like, I need to confirm some of this. Japan have been rebuilding their team. So after winning the World Cup in 2011 and then losing in the final in 2015, Japan started kind of rebuilding. They took a lot of their older players kind of out of the system. They failed to qualify for the Olympics in 2016, but knowing that they were going to be hosting the Olympics in 2020, I think they wanted to rebuild with the hopes of winning on home soil. So they start rebuilding, bringing some younger players in. In 2019, at the World Cup, they lost to the Netherlands in the round of 16. And then the Tokyo Olympics, this thing that had been built up as like the time to be in their prime, didn't quite go according to plan. It was a year delayed, but they ended up losing in the quarterfinals to eventual silver medalist Sweden, who honestly were very tough to beat that tournament, I will admit. Becky, how have you seen this rebuild go for Japan, considering that they had such massive successes in 2011 and 2015 playing in back-to-back World Cup finals, just like the U.S. women's national team? Has this rebuild set them up to like kind of reclaim their team as one of the best in the world, or do you think they're not quite there yet?
So I think you're right with the rebuild. The rebuild was really just phasing out most, if not all, their players that were over the age of 25. And I remember hearing and reading about this and just being like, well, I hope the U.S. Soccer Federation does not get the same idea. And I will say that in 2011 and 2015, Japan had Hamari Sawa, and I got to play with her with the Washington Freedom. And she is a generational talent. Like, she She was a very, very special player. And I think the team really rallied around her during that era, that 2011, 2015, 2016 area when they're very strong. And I think this current Japanese team is stronger than they were in 2019 at the Tokyo Olympics. I just don't know if they're capable yet of beating top-ranked teams game after game, especially if those teams are like physically gifted.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Becky. I do want to talk specifically about some of their players so that us and our listeners have some players to look out for and really pay attention to. Their captain, Saki Kumagai, who's a defender for Roma, she's undoubtedly Japan's star player. She leads the team as captain. She's a veteran. She has a ton of experience, really, really great ability to execute passes that actually often create goal-scoring opportunities. And this could be her final Olympics with Japan. So, Becky, as another defensive leader to Kumagai, another defensive leader, what do you see from her that makes you just be like, respect defensive leader to defensive leader?
I mean, yeah, I have so much respect for her. What she's done professionally and internationally it's been stellar. I mean, she's played at some of the biggest clubs in the women's game. She played at Frankfurt, Lyon. She's currently at Roma. So, her style is classy and it kind of just transcends whatever style is being played. Like, it's just like, it's timeless. And I also think that her longevity with the Japanese team shows that she can adapt to the game, because I think the international game over the last, decade for sure, but the last 15 years has changed so much. And she has always been able to stay at the top of her game at elite level and to stay relevant. And the fact that she can play central defender, she can play central midfield. She's just a really special player.
Yeah, I actually feel similarly about Yui Hasegawa, a midfielder for Manchester City. Hasegawa, she's just so clean on the ball and she always seems to find the right pass. And it actually reminds me, like when I was growing up in my early days in the national team, playing with Morgan Bryan was always like that. It's now Morgan Gautrat. She's on the Orlando Pride. It was like the ball was Velcro to her foot. And I would always watch her and be like, how are you doing this? Denise O'Sullivan of the North Carolina Courage, cleaning things up, always completing her passes. It's kind of like what midfielders aspire to, is like all this completion, playing penetrating balls, keeping the ball. And I just am in such wonder at her when I watch her play.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm also in wonder of Momoko Tanikawa. She is the midfielder who scored that banger against Brazil to seal Japan's comeback win. I think any player that's willing to chip the keeper from 35 yards out on an interception first-time ball needs to have some attention put on her. And if you're listening to this, I highly recommend you look up that goal because it is phenomenal.
It was such a great goal. And do you know what it actually reminded me of was when Vlatko always used to say, when we would win the ball back, he'd say the first touch should go forward. So when I remember when you and Abby Dahlkemper would win it, maybe this was before Vlatko, I don't really remember, but when you and Abby Dahlkemper would win it on your first touch and play it to a teammate forward, whether it was with your foot or your head, that was the key to starting a transitional attack. And then here we have Japan and Momoko Tanikawa playing it forward on her first touch straight into the back of the net. And I was like, well, that's pretty clutch.
Sam, when I am doing my imagery before games, usually I am just okay, I'm watching myself connect passes and what it feels like or getting into a tackle. And then my mind will drift a little bit and it'll go to how I'm going to score a goal. And the goal that she scored is exactly the goal that I imagine myself scoring.
Oh my God, you should clip it and then just replay it over and over. And it's that's for you next.
Exactly. That's what I will aspire to do next game.
It was such an incredible goal. And then we also can't not mention Hinata Miyazawa, the Golden Boot winner from last summer's World Cup, who scored 5 goals in just 5 games.
Yeah, this Manchester United player is one to watch. And I would say be wary of if you're the U.S. defense. She's got a nose for goal. She's relatively new, I would say, on the international stage, and I think she's hungry to make even more of a name for herself, especially after her success in the 2023 World Cup.
Yeah, so, it goes without saying, Japan has a ton of incredible players. They've been solid this tournament. I wouldn't say they've been breathtaking yet, But we've also kind of seen them. They've had a coaching change, and they're going through a phase where they, I think, for years and years were really purely possession based, like a lot of individual, like skill, technical. Let's complete a lot of passes. Let's make the team chase. And they're becoming a little bit more of a transition based team. I mean, they of course are still really technical, but especially what we saw from them last summer when they beat Spain in that game 4-0 in the group stage was this like lethal attack in transition. Which do you think is the more effective style for them?
I think you're right during the rebuild that Japan would possess the ball well and they'd advance up the field very methodically. But then at odd times or the wrong times, they would force that final ball. And so all that work in possession would just not come to any sort of chance on goal. And so now I think having worked a lot on their transition game while shoring up a very disciplined defensive shape, they kind of have the best of both worlds now. So I think they know that they can go on a fast break and be lethal like they did against Spain in 2023. But then they also have the ability to be like, I'm not going to force that final ball if it's not on. And they absolutely have the technical ability to just kind of spin out and just keep possession of the ball until something opens up.
Right. That balance sounds like it's pretty key for them. We already played Japan once earlier this year in the She Believes Cup, and we ended up winning 2-1, but Japan did score like literally seconds into the game. I remember like not even being settled yet to watch. In a moment of really, really great attacking brilliance down the right-hand side of the field. Did the goal or even that game where we played them earlier this year give you any insight into how this Japan team might target ways of exploiting the U.S.?
For sure. Yeah. I think this Japanese team has a very high soccer IQ. So if we're going to push outside backs higher, one or both of them, that space behind, I think you're right, it's going to be exploited. And I think that's exactly what happened when we gave up that goal in the She Believes Cup. And so I think we just have to be very sure of the spaces that we're leaving behind and making sure that we're set up defensively behind the ball.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Specifically to contain Japan's transition. So we're high up the field. We have the ball. How can we set up to contain them from transitioning quick?
Oh, my favorite thing in the world, countermeasures, baby. So we have to, like I said, we just have to be really excellent in keeping the right numbers back and in the right spaces. So especially with Japan, if they leave numbers higher, they're going to be put in spaces to be outlets so that if Japan clears the ball after winning it, they're just in really great in between spaces in front of our back line. So we just have to make sure that we're pushing into their outlets so that they can't keep possession. And Vlatko, I think you remember, would always say on transition, like, don't count numbers. And that basically means like if there's a transition, you're just putting your head down and you're just running back to our box. And it doesn't matter if we've got 8 people back there. If you're the 9th and 10th, you're out there. You're running back. You're getting back into position.
Yeah, like it could be 8 versus 2 and you're the 9th player and you still got to sprint back. Like you can't be being like, oh, we're fine, we're numbers up. Like you have to sprint back anyway.
Yeah, because you never know if you're going to be the player that gets that vital touch or like vital tackle in that stops a goal.
Love that. Always be chasing back. Japan is very organized defensively. They have a lot of numbers across the back, and they might sit in a low block. I mean, we've seen them do that a little bit so far this tournament. And knowing that the U.S. team typically performs best with space, I'm anticipating that Japan will maybe sit and just stay really organized and compact defensively. So what do we have to do to break down a low block, get through all those numbers, and create chances?
I think you just need to have a lot of variety in how you attack. And so I think combination play, flicks, scoops. I think you saw Soph Smith scoop a ball that Mal almost got on the end too.
Yeah.
I think when the opportunity arises to go one-on-one, you take it. And then the crossing, you have to cross from good spaces. There's kind of dead zones around the outside of the box that statistically, if you cross it from that area, it's just not a good chance of one of your teammates connecting with it. So just making sure you're not in those dead spaces when you're crossing the ball, but that you're also making the right runs in the box. I think you have to be really opportunistic. And I think with low blocks, sometimes you have to shoot from distance and just kind of threaten the thought that like, hey, if I get a hold of this one and like it goes in, like you're going to have to step out of your low block to put
Exactly.
pressure on me. And then that also opens up more spaces for these other things to happen. And so variety to me is key.
I love that. The other thing that Christy and I were talking about in the Do It Live after the Australia game was set pieces. I think sometimes when you just keep going and you keep getting stopped and you start to get frustrated when you're playing against a low block, scoring on a set piece or creating really quality chances off set pieces can be the thing that changes the game and opens it up a little bit. And I think we haven't seen this US team be at its best on set pieces yet, but we did score one with Trinity Rodman getting that kind of deflection goal against Australia. And so utilizing our set pieces, especially if we're kind of just keeping possession and going against that low block, trying to earn corners, trying to earn free kicks, that can be a way to break through as well. So I wanted to take a quick moment to say a goodbye to the teams that are heading home before we get to the other quarterfinal matchups on Saturday. So New Zealand, Zambia, and Nigeria all head home on 0 points and in 4th place in their respective groups. Australia heads home as the last place, 3rd place team. They had to watch Canada win the other day by a really narrow margin and seal their fate. And I'm sure it was devastating for them to see that and know that that meant that they were going home. But Becky, which of these teams that are heading home were you impressed with, and which were you the most disappointed in?
I would have to say I was most impressed with Zambia. And I think that Zambia versus Australia game will live on in Olympic history as one of the most entertaining, like pulling my own hair out games. And I think that Zambia is just a few pieces away on the field from being very formidable. And on the other side, I would have to say I was more disappointed in Australia.
I know.
I think after the success of 2023,
I know.
I was expecting them to carry that momentum into this Olympics. And I think I'm most disappointed that they played it so safe against us in that last game, and they just went for it too late, because like looking back, them tying that game up would have been enough to put them through.
I just think that they were coming off this, like, for lack of a better word, shit show. And I think, like, internally, without Sam Kerr as their leader, I think they must have been like, we can't do what we did against Zambia again. And in talking to Christy about that, it's kind of like, when they turned it on against Zambia, they won the game. Like, yeah, it was crazy, and yeah, it was a shit show, and yeah, they gave up 5 goals, but they won and they got 3 points, and that's what was keeping them alive. And I know you don't want to go into a game against the US and leave yourselves vulnerable for the same situation, but our Olympic bronze medal game against Australia was 4-3. Australia, when they push, when they go for it, like, they are really dangerous and they can score goals. So I kind of agree with you. I was disappointed in their performances. I feel for them. We did just also hear that Tony Gustafsson, the head coach, has been let go by the federation. This tournament was clearly a disappointing result. They got knocked out in the group stage, but they did have that magical run last summer at their home World Cup in Australia. They made it all the way to the semifinals, and they like won over the hearts of their entire nation. Have you seen that video, Becky, of the person on the plane and all of the plane TV screens are on the Australia game?
Yeah.
Like,
that's awesome.
And moments like that, I'm like, they were riding this incredible wave. They became celebrities in Australia. The Matildas, they're so loved. Tony's being let go. We both played for Tony in 2019. He was the assistant coach of the US team when we won the World Cup. Has he had, like, how have you seen his impact on Australian football? And what do you think is the next step for this federation as they now move forward without him?
I think we have to keep into account a couple factors. I think when you're missing Sam Kerr, one of the most prolific goal scorers in modern history, like, any team is going to suffer. We can't forget that in 2023 World Cup, the Australian team struggled in their first 2 matches of the group. They struggled against Ireland, but got the win. And then they lost to Nigeria. And so that's, we don't really remember that, but the outcry from the people of Australia and the media was like, Tony's got to go. Like, he should get fired mid-tournament. And then all of a sudden they turned it on. They beat Canada 4-0, I think. And then you're right. They went on this like majestical run into the semifinals. And then like the Olympics happened.
Yeah.
And for me, I feel like the Matildas are kind of a vibe team.
Mm-hmm.
So when they have the momentum, they really thrive. But when the vibes are off, it's really tough for them to reverse and get that momentum back. And I think when you put a ceiling on this team, or you kind of like put the reins on them and don't let them go, they're going to struggle. And so, like you said, like the bronze medal match against us, when they just like went for it, when they went for it against Zambia, and then when they went for it against us in the latter stages of the game, they caused us a lot of problems. And so I feel like the next coach of this team needs to know what they have and let them vibe, like figure out what gets them going and just let them go.
I actually think that is so smart. It's like, you can win 6-5. You got 3 points. Like, obviously it's not ideal, and like maybe like shore up the back line and transition. Like, you can work on that, but you still win.
You still win. You still get the 3 points.
All right. Super interesting take, Becky. I really appreciated that. So this U.S. team, we've been matched up obviously against Japan for our quarterfinal. Pretty tough opponent, considering that we got 9 points in our group. I feel like getting Japan when you like got all 9 points in the group is kind of a tough draw, but that's okay. I guess that's just the Olympics. Canada and Germany are playing each other in the other quarterfinal in our bracket. So if we can beat Japan, we would play the winner of that game. Becky, how do you see that one going, and how do you hope it goes?
Okay, I would just not want to be playing Canada right now. And I think Germany also is in a bit of a rebuild. And so I just think the Canadian spirit right now is just strong, and they've clearly come together over this drone gate. So I'm going with Canada, but if I wanted the US to face either Canada or Germany, I'd want them to face Germany again, obviously from that 4-1 defeat. That was a pretty thorough beatdown.
Yeah. I also will say, I think now that you say that, I agree. I feel like Canada, look, it could go a multitude of ways. I'm just going to go on a little tangent here. Canada could also be mentally exhausted and drained.
True.
Germany could figure it out. So anything could really happen. When I think about the US having to face Canada, do I want that back? Am I like, I want to play Canada in the semifinal? And do I think we're a better team? Yeah. Yes, Canada right now has something special going on because they're like fighting to prove themselves, but so are we. And so I think I'm like, maybe I want that. Maybe I like want the redo.
Sam, I love that. And I'm like so ashamed of my answer now. It's like, bring on whoever. I don't care. Oh, Sam, thank you for that.
Becky, you just got a little caught up in the commentating, and I reminded you of your inner fire.
Thank you. God, I'm so disappointed in myself.
Do you want to retape it?
No. Show what you just did for me. You just brought back my spirit.
Okay, well, freaking go USA. I hope we get Canada. In the other games, France is going to play Brazil and Spain are going to play Colombia. Neither France nor Brazil have really looked their best so far this tournament. I'm a little bit disappointed. They've both been, they're through, but they've been getting kind of inconsistent results. Brazil barely got through in third place. But interestingly, I think Brazil has a really special reason to try to move on, considering that Marta got a red card that will have her suspended for this quarterfinal game. So if Brazil can win and beat the home nation France, which is a really big ask, Marta could come back and play again in the semifinal, and the whole thing won't be over yet.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that could galvanize a group. I think you saw how upset Marta was, and then also her teammates, but also the Spanish teammates like consoling her.
Oh.
So I think the Brazilian team's like, we can't let this like talisman of ours end that way. So I'm sure that's giving a little extra like oomph.
Yeah.
And I also would just say for France, hosting is really difficult. There are a lot of added pressures on host nations during these world tournaments. And in a way, I'm almost like, I'm kind of glad in my career I didn't have to do that. We were always visiting these other nations because there is a lot of added pressure. And I think France is feeling that a little bit.
Well, I think that they definitely felt it in 2019 when we played them in the quarterfinal. It was a really close game. We only won 2-1. That tournament was in France, but I think they felt it then too. I think you're right. It's a lot of pressure to be in this home tournament. It should be all about you. But France, I just don't know what it is. I don't know if I've seen them have what it takes yet to really get them all the way to the final. So I'm eager to see what happens in this one. Another game we have, Spain versus Colombia. Two teams with huge football cultures in their countries, but a little bit different in their approaches and strengths. And there's an old kind of saying, there are piano players and there are piano carriers, there are warriors, there are poets. But I think the best teams, Becky, have a balance of both. Like you have players who will do the beautiful football, and then you have players that will start a fight on the side. So I'm so interested in what's going to happen in this game, and what these teams are going to bring out of each other. What are you looking forward to, and what do you think is going to happen?
Well, first I just want to ask, do you think that you were a warrior or a poet?
I wasn't a warrior. I'm not a fighter.
Oh, I strongly disagree.
Really?
Strongly disagree.
Do you think
with
I'm just a gentle giant though? That I just would run around like an oaf and accidentally hurt people?
No, I think you think that about yourself, but I actually think on the field, I was always any tackle you'd get into, I'd be in my mind telling the other player, jump out of it, get out of it.
Is she trying to murder her?
Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm surprised that you've struggled answering this
question.
Well,
I definitely see red. So I will admit that. And I wouldn't describe my play as poetry. I mean, I'm freaking 6 feet tall. It'd have to be it's metal music, not poetry.
I feel like you're a warrior poet rising. If we were supposed to some sort of astrology combination.
What are you?
Oh, I mean, I think was just the person that was just going to do exactly what she needed to do and get the ball to the poets.
See, I feel I always just did exactly as I was told. I was just the teacher's pet.
Huh, that's an interesting take.
I know, it's not real. That teachers' pets are not included in folklore of great battles.
Or are they?
But hey, I could rewrite history. Okay.
Okay, sorry. And so I think that Spain's going to win. I think that Colombia is going to make it really tough for them.
Yeah.
And there's a freedom with the way this Colombian team plays that makes it really difficult on teams. And they do have special players, and they are allowed and encouraged to do those special things. And so I think it'll be really interesting to see how Spain deals with that. But it'll be tight, but I do think Spain's gonna win.
Yeah, when I zoom out and look at the whole tournament, I think, and I hope I'm right, that it's going to be Spain and US in the final. Ooh. And I think that's a game I can't make a prediction on yet until I see a little bit more. But I do want to zoom even further out and go back to the Olympics as a whole, because there are so many other exciting things happening. Michele Kang, the owner of the Washington Spirit and Lyon and the London City Lionesses, she committed $4 million to the USA rugby team to help ensure that, as she put it, instead of winning bronze again in 2028, they win gold. It was such a cool moment to see her, who's this soccer businesswoman badass, addressing the USA rugby team, telling them what she wants to do and how she wants to help them transform their program. Becky, what do you make of this, Michele Kang and her vision for women's sports?
Having an ally like Michele Kang just makes such a difference. And I have this friend that gave me this analogy about how you create change. And if you imagine a castle, you need the people storming the castle, knocking at the gates, demanding to be let in, but that you also need those people who are in the inner circle, kind of whispering in the ears of the royalty to open those gates. And Michele Kang is adding this new element, because she isn't whispering into ears. She's kind of shouting from the battlements that the tide is changing while opening the gates to the castle herself.
Oh my God, she's like a warrior, poet, royalty, queen.
Yes, all of those things.
Well, thank God she wants to put all of her power into women's sports. It's so incredible. Another thing that she just did is announce the launch of Kaniska Sports International. It's a company aimed at providing better environments for female athletes and changing how female athletes train. So only 6% of sports science research is dedicated to female athletes, which is absurd. It's not the 1950s, you guys. But Michele Kang and Kaniska are committed to changing that. And Becky, I feel like this idea and this program is like potentially going to work on solutions to the deluge of ACLs that we're seeing in women's soccer, to the lack of attention to menstrual cycles, to so many of the problems that you and I and all of our teammates face as female athletes that we've only ever been able to like guess at the answers for. Like that's what Michele Kang and this company wants to solve.
It is wild to me to think like how much has changed since the start of us playing soccer at a high level. Like when you think about lifting and how we would lift in college to how we lift now.
Yeah.
And the little bit of research about that. And you're right about menstrual cycles and how little we know about how different hormones at different stages affects the body and affects us when we play. I can't believe it's taken this long and like how in the dark we've been. And I'm so excited for this. I am so excited for these future generation of athletes that are going to be cared for and prioritized. And like, good on Michele.
I know. God bless Michele Kang.
Yeah.
Freaking jeepers creepers. Okay, we have to wrap this up, and we have to wrap it up by bringing it back around to the US versus Japan game coming up. Becky, do you have a score prediction?
I am going to go 3-1. US.
Okay, 3-1. I feel like so confident. Like I know that I'm so positive, everybody. I know I'm always cheering for the US. I truly, to my core, like feel so confident that we're going to win this game. I'm going 2-0 US, and I'm so excited to watch.
I'm so excited too. I mean, it is 6 a.m. Pacific time, 9 a.m. Eastern.
Your worst nightmare, 6 a.m., Becky. Oh my God.
It's a little rough, but you know what? I'm going to do it. Right now, it's listed on being on Peacock and Telemundo, but keep your eyes peeled to our social media for any updates from the TV networks. You can follow along with us at Women's Game MIB on IG, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads.
Oh, Becky, thank you so much for joining me. I am going to be back on Saturday after the game with a Do It Live, which is a live reaction show immediately after the final whistle of the game on the Women's Game YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed to that and make sure you have your notifications turned on so that you don't miss us. Also, while you're at it, please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. This has been Going for Gold, a podcast brought to you by the Women's Game and Allstate. Thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow.